So there is a water leak. I topped off the radiator and it's leaking out probably from where the water pump mates up to the block. I don't know the details of that exactly. There was a water pump that we found in the boot, so it's probably quite telling that that was on the list of the things that need to be done by the previous owner. But yeah, useful to know, isn't it? But I've topped it off, and yes, it is leaking. There is a wee bit of fuel in the fuel filter, and whilst I'm not intending on getting this thing up and driving, should it start, I'm just going to try to start it out of curiosity to see if it tells me about anything else before I then begin the long road of disassembly. So let's tick it over and see what happens. Well, car started, which is yeah, both great news and just wonderful, because it means the engine is in reasonably good fettle, which is going to help when we go to rebuild it. That we know we're not going to have to necessarily, you know, put money into repairing something, although obviously reserve judgment until I open it up. Probably be eating my hat at that stage. It started yesterday, which I'll show the clip of, and it took a bit of while to get going, and then I couldn't keep it running, and it eventually conked out, and I wasn't able to restart it, and then the battery died. So I was going to leave it at that, safe in the knowledge that it had started, but I was just keen to get it going. Obviously, the water leak is still there. You know, it's obviously got a bit of a problem, so I couldn't really let it come up to temperature. I didn't want to let it come up to temperature. I noticed that the fuel filter, and I guess this is an aftermarket one, which is quite useful really, because you can see where the fuel's coming through, and that was obviously very empty yesterday, and so I figured, well, it's just not getting fuel. So I took this off, and I just glugged in a bit of fuel into this hose. And then I filled the fuel filter, you know, through one of the little ends manually, put it back on, and it pretty much, well, you'll see it pretty much fired after a few cranks, and I put a new battery on there as well. So that's, yeah, really good news. The water leak's pretty significant. You obviously couldn't drive the car, and it's very tempting to fix that and then go for a drive and get an idea of condition of, you know, drivetrain and gearbox and other things, but I think that's just going to be a distraction, and it's also a bit of a risk, isn't it? You know, the car's not registered or insured for the road, etc. So even a trip around the warehouse with the compound would probably be a little bit risky. So I'm really happy about that. But I need to get back to work. Gloves back on, and back to disassembly, and see what we'll find when we do that. So just for the record, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 captive nuts in the body shell that the roof bolts to. Well, this is part of the roof, so we won't actually be using this one again, because this is not, it's not in any state to be reused, but nonetheless. So I've taken out the bottom two, and there's one more at the top right. That's the same both sides. So yeah, big rusty hole. So I did think it was going to be like that underneath that plank. I mean, it's probably no better or worse than I imagined. These are the upstands that are normally obviously vertical, and there's one each side. A little diamond hole is what a tie rod hooks into, and there's a clamp which then holds the leading edge of the battery. So the battery actually wasn't secured in place at all. I think you can get a repair panel. Well, there are repair panels shown generally for this area, as there are for much of the car, but I have seen them available for this bottom piece, the panel that goes under the battery. So that will be a good start, and that itself is a relatively simple sheet that just has a down turn around the edge, so we can probably unzip that from all the plug welds, chisel it off, and then put that new panel in. And I've seen other people do that repair, I think, so I can follow precedent. The bulkhead, I think there are repair panels, and I think it's in 2, possibly 3 pieces. There's this top piece, and ours has got this hole in it. So this top piece, which has a seam here, well, maybe I can get a repair panel for it. If I can, great. Then I can unzip that and replace that, and it'll be replaced up to the. I think it has this is all one piece up to where it holds the seam. I think. I'm not exactly sure on the details. And then this bottom piece, I've seen it in the diagrams, but it's possibly not available anymore, which is then a bit more tricky. If it's solid around the steering column, which it feels like it is, I would be inclined to cut as close as I dare to the steering column, because that's just a bit of a tricky shape, and then perhaps replace this panel. I don't know. Let's see. I mean, maybe it's deceptive that it's actually this piece is actually solid enough. It needs to be cleaned up a bit. I mean, there are some pinholes and stuff, so maybe it does need to come out. All right, that goes on the list. Obviously, as quite one of the key rust repairs. And then we have to see whether it extends down into the piece around the gearbox. I don't think it does. I hope that's fairly solid. There we go. Working. Took a few pumps, and this is not a petrol pump hose. This is a hose that I found in a in a pet shop, and it's for cleaning out fish tanks, would you believe? But yeah, so it's probably not rated for fuel, but it'll do for a couple of uses, I'm sure. Now, what to do with the petrol? I might be cruel and put it through my Subaru. Right, so next on the list is dash. So I want to get the dash, H-brace, and then probably the metal fascia behind the dash and steering column. I want to be able to steer the thing for a while though, just to move it around the shop. So we'll see in which order I do that. And then I can get gearbox cover off, and then windscreen frame and handbrake, and then on and on and on. But for now, dashboard. This is surprisingly comfortable. I think I'll just take a little rest. Oh, that was quite an effort. But I knew I wanted to get in with my head under here, because I know I've got a little bit of history with dashes, and I know that it's a bit of a wrestle to get the clamps off the main gauges. So that's why I wanted to get my head under here and do it with eyes on it. When I first tried to do it, I was doing it blind, reaching under the dash. It's actually a disaster. It's horrible to do that. Okay, now I have to actually get out, once I've now got very comfortable, and undo these clamps. Right, come and have a look at this. comes off, it needs a bit of dexterity. The problem with these guys, they haven't got any, it's not the right tool, because they haven't got the little serrations like pliers have. It's got to be a pair of pliers. Ideally, I have the little mini mole grips, but I haven't got those. Ow. Yeah. Cable to the scalp. I'd wear a hard hat, but there's no space. Okay, just you and me now. Just you and me, Mr. Bolt, Mr. Nail Nut. But I think I won't use nail nuts again. I'm going to use wing nuts. Or use a different arrangement for the dash to hold in the gauges. It's very seized, I don't know why. I think aluminium maybe. Aluminium on steel, that old thing. Bit of bimetallic corrosion. And as always, the right tool. I'm glad I bought this the other day. I bought this as a sort of set of pliers and wrenches. Knipex stuff, lovely. I've spent about 2 hours doing this one bolt. So if this was a client car, I would not have made any money today unless I charged the client the line item on the invoice. 2 hours, nailed nut, not my fault, triumphs. Hooray! Too tired to get out. I think I will need rescuing. Okay. So, got it out. Now I damaged it a little bit. But even if that goes back on the car, it'll be a nice memory of the occasion. Right, we'll bag and tag these. Let's see if the gauge comes out. Right, good shot of the wiring so I can refer to it later on. Right, so one by one, fuel gauge, right hand side, green with black stripe. And on the left hand side is a double green something, double green black stripe. So the Worth guys are here. Installation day for the lift. I'm going to move the TR4A in a second. Right, so the lift is in. And it took, well, something like 2 days to get it all in. But the team were very good from Worth Golf. and very diligent. So they took their time. It was a good couple of days to get it assembled on the floor and then lifted up. The tricky bit was actually getting it line and levelled, getting the columns plumb, as well as trying to get a good balance between the line level on the columns and the level of the pads. And I was being, well, perhaps a bit too fussy as to trying to get line and level of the columns and the pads to be, you know, pretty much spot on at the same time. It's a bit of a geometric trick that you have to compromise one or the other. In an ideal world, you'd have an absolutely perfectly level floor. Now, obviously, this is an industrial floor, and so it has got some level differences and some lumps and bumps in it. So the columns do need to get shimmed. The guy gave me a bit of a crash course on how to use it. They had their own van on it to do the balancing, so I got to see them operate it, and he took me through the various procedures of using it. And I've been in and around lifts before, always when someone else is working on my car, not really when I've actually been the only person operating the thing. So I just got to get a bit familiar with it and make sure I know how to use it with the car and to do so safely, of course. So the next steps on the car are going to be removing the body panels, and then it's going to be into the engine bay. So when I get to engine bay, I'm going to need to put it on the lift and start undoing bolts from underneath, etc. All right, now with the lift now in, that mustn't be a distraction because I could happily go and play with that for a couple of days, but I need to get back to what I'd started, which was to disassemble the TR4A and finish off in here in the interior. I got all the other knobs off, which came off okay. I couldn't for the life of me get the choke off, no matter how hard I pressed on the little button on the inside of the knob. It'll be easy to do if I take it out and do it on the bench probably. So I'll disconnect the choke cable from the choke in it, and then I can pull this through. So this brace goes from a captive bolt up here down to this right hand hole on the top clamp, and that brace, well, I don't know, but it's not on the TR6, so it might be unique to TR4A5, maybe 250. I'd quite like it on the TR6 because I'm sure it helps restrain the column. Yeah, and there is a bit of play in the column, which will be bushes. Only a tiny bit. It's almost acceptable, really. But we can capture all that when we put it in. I'll just note to self that I can investigate making that brace for retrofitting that brace to the TR6. I wonder whether it has the same captive bolt at the top. I'll have a look. So those two little captive threads that are they're welded to the back of the metal fascia. They've got a double nut on them, which is the same as the TR6, but this is just spinning. Both nuts are spinning, and there's not enough room to get one spanner on one nut and another spanner on another nut to crack them loose against one another. If I unwind both together, it will, I'm sure, just damage the threads all the way along. I don't need to get that bottom bracket out now because the steering column actually, once I undo it from the engine bay side, I think the column will pull forwards. So let's try that, and then it'll be easier to get that bracket out later on when the metal fascia is out, and I can do it on the table. Let's do it that way. This one little strut that goes from the metal fascia to this bracket. On the TR6 you have this sort of slightly more elaborate or beefier anti-torque strap, I think they call it, something like that. This has just got this guy. Makes life a bit easier. Either that or it's missing one on the other side. They don't feel that nice. Feel nice at all. It goes loose and tight. It's very slightly bent. I don't know whether it's supposed to be bent. Obviously it will bend if it gets clamped down hard enough. If it's not supposed to be bent, probably needs replacing. That might explain why the nuts are quite hard to undo. So yeah, with the lift in and the place probably as pristine as it's ever going to be, TR4A disassembly started, at least on the interior. The TR4A started. We're getting a measure of what the rust looks like on the car. I've got the tools, air compressors up and running. This place is looking, you know, fairly organised in terms of storage, at least the start of it. You know, I need to get racks and shelves and whatnot. Which means that probably the only thing that I haven't really started is, well, I haven't really started the TR6. I think that's next week's task. See if that car will start. See you next week.